Okay, today, platypuses, this afternoon we're going to do a history lesson, okay? We've been learning about the Great Fire of London that happened in the past. We are going to look at London in the past and London in the present, okay? We're going to compare them. So today, what you're going to do is, can I find out some of the ways in which London has changed? And I want you to be able to talk about how the buildings in London were different in the past, how people travelled differently in London in the past, and can you compare past and present London to say what things are different and what things are similar? That's the success criteria. Okay, so first of all, we're just going to have a look at this timeline. Do you remember when you made a timeline in last week's history lesson? You made a timeline of the events of the Great Fire of London. So you would have had the Sunday at the beginning of your timeline. Okay, so you would have a line like this, and you would have had when the fire ended, which was on the Thursday. So this is a bit similar. This is a timeline for the days of the week, and you might make a timeline like this, and you might add things to it, like what you do on that day. Now, this is the timeline of the year, so it's slightly differently. This is slightly different. So can you see here we've got 1900, 1950, 2000, and now 2021. That's where we are now. These are all in the past. What year did the Great Fire of London happen? Okay, what year? Can you say that to me? It happened in 1666. Where would we put that on the timeline? Would it go along here somewhere? Would it go after 2021 or would it go before 1900? Have a think about it. Well, we know that 1666 happened a long time ago, so it would definitely go over here. Okay, in fact, it happened before, it happened in about 355 years ago. Okay, now you might like to create your own timeline. You could create a timeline of your life. You could put when you were born. Okay, so if you were born in 2014, think about where you would put it. So 2000 is here and 2021 is here. Where are you going to put 2014? It's going to go in between here, isn't it? Okay, or you might have been born in 2015. You might like to add other events in your life onto the timeline, okay? And you can get your grown-ups at home to help you do that. Let's move on to the next slide. So we are going to look at some images of modern London, okay? Now, what do you already know about London, okay? And think about that. I'm going to show you some pictures, and when I'm showing you the pictures, I want you to think about the houses and buildings, London at night, the roads, the transport, so how do people travel? What do people wear? What jobs do they do? Anything else that you might think is interesting. So you might want to just pause the video before I show you the photos and just have a little think about that. You might like to jot your ideas down, okay? Or you can just say them out loud to somebody at home. That's absolutely fine, okay? So let's go on to the next slide and have a look at the pictures. So this is a picture looking down from space, okay? Can you see this? Can you see where the UK is? The UK is over here, and we've got Europe. So the UK is part of Europe, that's the continent, so we can see it all here. And then London is around here, okay? So that's what it looks like if you're looking down. Right, what's happening in this picture? What is this picture of? Can you see the river that's running through? This is London, okay? Look at what you can see. Can you tell me the name of the river? Okay, it played a very important part in the Great Fire of London. What's the name of it? It's called the River Thames, okay? And have a look around. Can you see all the buildings? Have a think about what the buildings are made of, okay? Are there lots of buildings? Are there just a few buildings? Let's go on to the next one. Okay, again, here are some more buildings. Now, some of these buildings are quite tall, okay? And where our school is in Vauxhall, we see lots of tall buildings. Think about the buildings, think about what they're made of, okay? Have a good look at that. You can always come back to these photos afterwards or any of these slides because I will save it for you. Okay, and then this is another picture of London at night time. Again, we've got the River Thames, and can you see the bridge? Can you see all the lights? Do you think there were that many lights around the time of the Great Fire of London? Think about the materials that the buildings are made out of now. We have looked at materials in our science lessons, and I know that you know what materials are used to make buildings, because you've been going around like looking. Think about what the buildings were made of during the time of the Great Fire of London. That's a very important thing that you've learned. I know it is. Okay, so here we go. Here is a house. Okay, you might find houses like this in London. You might live in a house like this in London. Okay, how is it different from a house during the time of the Great Fire of London? Look at what it's made from. What is it made from? I know you all know the answer to that. Okay, look at these buildings. Okay, you might live in a building like this. These are blocks of flats. These are quite tall blocks of flats. Okay, did they have tall blocks of flats during the time of the Great Fire of London? Have a think about it. Think about all that learning that you've already done. Okay, I know you've watched some videos, you've done research, you've learned so much about the Great Fire of London. Think about the transport. Look at the roads. Look at what people travel in to get around, okay? So there's a bus, there's some taxis here, okay? Look at the road. How is it different to the time of the Great Fire of London? And again, did they have, this is the underground, this is the tube, okay? Look at all these buildings around here. Look at all these people, okay? And I can see another taxi here. Did people go on the underground during the time of the Great Fire of London? How did they travel to get to places? Okay, again, we've got somebody on an escalator, okay? Look at the clothes that they're wearing too, okay? Look at the clothes that they're wearing. Did people wear the same sort of clothes during the Great Fire of London? Okay, again, we've got some people and look at what they're wearing. Think about what jobs people do now. Think about the type of jobs that they might have done during the time of the Great Fire of London. You've probably already learnt lots about this. I know you have. Okay, so we are going to go back in time by around 355 years to visit London in the year 1666 because that's when the Great Fire of London happened, okay? It was a very important year in the history of London, okay? So I want you to think about, so you can do this at home, okay? You can do this with somebody at home. I want you to discuss your ideas about how London might have been different at that time, okay? You have been doing so much work on the Great Fire of London, so maybe pause the video, okay? I've already asked you some questions as we were looking at the pictures of modern London, but these are some questions to think about. Houses and buildings, what might have these have been built from? I think you already know the answer to that one. Think about the people, what might they have worn? Okay, did they look the same as we do now? Did they wear the same clothes as us? Transport, I know you know the answer to this one too. How would people in London have travelled around? Okay, and the roads and the streets at night, okay, what might they have looked like? Okay, did they have lots of lights during the Great Fire of London? Did they have the same kind of lights as us? So now it's your time to draw these ideas, and what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video now and you're going to complete this activity. So what you're going to do is, can you see down here, you've got houses and buildings, people, transport, a street at night. You've got the present day, which is now 2021, and you've got 1666, which was in the past, okay? And during the time of the Great Fire of London. So you need to draw a picture of what buildings look like now, houses or buildings, and what they look like in 1666. And you do the same for the people. So I'm thinking about when you do the people, it's what kind of clothes people wear today and what kind of clothes they would have worn during 1666. Was it the same? Did they wear the same clothes as we wear now? Again, the transport in the present day. So now, how do people travel about? And then, how did people travel in 1666? And the final one is the streets at night. So we saw lots of pictures of London at night. Okay, so you know what the street would look like at night time. Did it look the same in 1666? What did they use to light the streets with? Okay, so I want you to pause the video, do this activity, and then once you've done this activity, now you can then carry on with the rest of this slideshow. Now, if you don't know the answer to some of these, that's absolutely fine, okay? You can find the answer to these by doing some research. You can even share your ideas on Google Classroom. You might like to ask the questions if you're not sure, and maybe somebody who has already done it or who already knows the answer might be able to answer your question. That's fine. So pause the video, do the activity. You can do a picture, you can do a sentence to go with it as well if you like, or you can label it. I'll leave it totally up to you. Okay, and I'm just going to carry on now with the rest of the slideshow. So I want you to think about your London in the past and think about, I want you to compare your ideas, okay? So we're going to look at some images now of London from the 17th century because that's what it was called. It was during the 17th century, okay? And how did these pictures compare to your ideas that you've just drawn, okay? Why don't we have photos of London in 1666? Do you know the answer to that? Did they have cameras? Okay, and what can we use to find out what London was like then? Think about that question as well. We're actually going to learn a little bit more about that now. Okay, so here is a 17th century map of London. Can you see the River Thames here? Think about how it looks different to the one that we looked up of modern London. And then this is a painting of the Thames, London in the 17th century. Okay, does it look the same now? And then this is a drawing of St. Paul's Cathedral. Okay, so this is what it looked like. And we know that St. Paul's Cathedral burnt down and it had to be rebuilt. So it doesn't look the same now. Okay, this is a painting of Samuel Pepys. We know that he wrote a diary about the Great Fire of London. And we're actually going to learn a bit more about him later on in the week and next week. Okay, so it was actually quite important. His diary helped us find out a lot about the Great Fire of London. And then this last picture is an artist did this, and it is an artistic impression of the view of 17th century London with the present day view in the distance. Can you see the present is here and the past, what London looked like in the past is here. Okay, so if you didn't find the answer to that the questions on the, well, not the questions, but if you didn't know the answers to what your picture should look like in the past, that's absolutely fine. You might have found out the answer now. You could also do some research and you could add that to it. Okay, so I can't wait to see your work. So please do share that with me. And if you have any questions, you can always put them on Google Classroom for the rest of the class to answer.